Hey, Chase Thomas again, back here with the fourth and final part of my little series, Why I Am a Fascist. I wanted to go ahead and pick up where I left off in the last video and answer just a couple more questions that were left for me on part one. And I want to say real quick, if you have not seen part one, two, and three of Why I Am a Fascist, please do so now to give you kind of a better idea of what I'm driving at here. So, here we go. First question. If you are a Catholic, you should ask the Pope what he thinks about fascism. Very interesting comment, and I had kind of hoped that that had come up when I recorded the first part of this. So what I'll say about that is this. Yes, I am a Catholic, and I am a fascist. I don't know, obviously, what the Pope himself thinks about fascism, but I'd imagine he would probably say that he's not a huge fan of it, because historically the Catholic Church... it has always had a complex view of fascism, but generally I don't think that the church favors it very much. But what I would say is, what's interesting is that the Vatican itself, is a state. It's a nation, and it has a system of government. Now, it's obviously very different from other secular nations in the world because it's a church, so it's religious. But if I remember correctly, the actual technical term for the way the Catholic Church is governed is it is described as a, and somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, but it is described as a theocratic absolute monarchy. Now, it's theocratic obviously because it's a theocracy, and because the Catholic Church is a religion, so of course it's going to be religiously governed. But it is also an absolute monarchy by design. Now, an absolute monarchy is authoritarian, just like fascism. An absolute monarchy is also the most authoritarian of all of the different types of monarchies. So like a constitutional monarchy is obviously a bit more democratic and not as authoritarian as an absolute monarchy would be. So like at the end of the day, fascism and an absolute monarchy, and even a theocratic absolute monarchy, are pretty much in exactly the same camp. Like, they're both an auth-right on the political compass. So, like, fascism and the way that the Catholic Church is governed, it's like they're not too dissimilar. So it like the Vatican, it has a military force, the Swiss Guard. It also has the Papal Secret Service or whatever they have. So like they have their own protective military. I mean, it's not huge, but like in that sense, and there is nothing outside of Catholicism, obviously, within the Vatican. So like in that sense, like those two principles pretty much mirror the principles of fascism. Like it's almost exactly the same in principle, like at the most basic sense. Like really the only difference between the Vatican and like historical fascist regimes is that they're not like actively trying to take over the world, which is also something I'm not a fan of. I don't advocate like militarism to the extent that we should be just invading every nation on earth to make it all conform with us. But yeah, so at the end of the day, the Vatican and fascism, like their governmental principles, they're really kind of the same. So like I would be a bit surprised if Catholicism became unified with disliking fascism. So yeah, that's my spiel on that. Next. Since you propose nationalism, how do you define the nation that we should protect? What is our shared culture? One part of nationalism involves determining the in-group and the out-group. How would this be done? Is it purely just if you are American or not? Well, that's a very sensible question. How do we determine the in-group and the out-group, and what is it? Well, the question it's like, what could that possibly be? Like, what culture could we use to unify ourselves? Now, historically, fascist regimes have attempted to do that with race. They would say, like, okay, we all need to be white, so we need to get rid of anybody who's not white. Obviously, I don't favor that because that's racism, and racism is wrong. So we have to look to something else to unify ourselves. And what better to unify us than religion? So if you were to ask me what would be the in-group and the out-group, well, it's very simple. It would be Christians, or in my particular case, Catholics. Like, the reality is I want to see a nation. I would love to see the world united in Catholicism, but I want to see the United States of America a Catholic nation. Like, that is what I want to see. And obviously there's going to be a lot of people that don't like hearing that. Like, Muslims wouldn't like hearing that. Jews wouldn't like hearing that. Atheists wouldn't like hearing that. But, I mean, to everyone, I would say, well, I mean, that's kind of just too bad. Like, a nation cannot survive. It cannot stand. It cannot last when you have a bunch of different groups of people who all have different sets of morals and ideologies and all disagree with each other in the same space. That's just a free-for-all. It's a war zone, and that is an absolute recipe for disaster. Like, it has been relatively sustained over the last 100 years or something like that, but at the end of the day, it is not going to work. And realistically, in society today, all of these people are at each other's throats. Like, it is time for people, me personally, I believe it is time for Catholics in particular to truly, truly stand up for what they believe in and I don't believe in forcing my religion on people, but we need to do something to seriously get the message out and say, hey, this is the way, and if you're not going to adhere to that, if you're not going to adhere to this religion or this culture or this practice or this set of laws that determines how we want to see people living in society, well, you're going to have to get out. And yes, I do believe in rounding up people that do not adhere to this because they are a threat to society. And if they become dangerous, if they become violent, which they have been, by the way, for many, many years, law enforcement, people with guns need to step in and take action and do something, because if they don't, well, then the culture, the society as we know it is not going to survive. But eventually, one culture, say Islam, which definitely wants to take this country over, if we don't do something to stand up and stop it, they will overthrow us, and then they will become the law of the land. So please do not think that every religion, every culture, every ideology can just magically coexist with each other and live peacefully, because that has never happened and it's never going to happen. So I hope I answered that. Next, you invalidated your own argument in a couple of ways when you say that this is how societies have always worked, referring to rigid class structure. You realize those societies always collapse within a few hundred years and have to be rebuilt. Generally, they are rebuilt more equitable and have prosperity, then devolve into rigid class structure with an overpowered ruling class and collapse again. Such a common phenomenon that there is a predictive model called the Strauss-Howe generational theory. Okay, interesting. I've never heard of that theory. I'd have to look into it. But yeah, I touched on that in my last video, part 3. Again, one of the truest things I've ever heard in recent years is, and I don't even remember who said it, but the only guarantee of power is that one day you will lose it. I am not advocating for an eternally glorious and surviving nation that's going to last forever, because I don't believe that on Earth that's possible. Excuse me. But I do believe that a nation should attempt to make itself as strong as it possibly can and last for as long as it possibly can. Some empires in history have lasted for 1,000 years. Some have lasted for 5 years or less. It doesn't really matter, how long the empire lasts, because there's always going to be corruption. Somebody's eventually going to do something wrong within the society to cause it to crumble. But such is life, but that is not an excuse for any nation to not try to do everything that it can to build its military, to strengthen its nation, to unite its people in culture and and create a great nation. Like that's to me just seems to be pretty much common sense, which is why I embrace fascism, because that explains the ultimate goal. Secondly, but really just a semantics argument, you say communism doesn't work, then later say communism is just fascism, therefore it follows that fascism doesn't work. No. When I say that communism doesn't work, I mean that like the original idea of communism does not work. Communism at the beginning, again, that like I've said several times in this little series, communism attempts to create a classless society where there's no rich people, there's no poor people, like we're all in the same class, we're all working towards the same goal, and we all make the only the amount of money that we need, and we all just get along. And there's no class structure. Again, nonsense. That has never happened, and it's never going to happen. So that aspect of communism does not work, because when they try that, then they realize they screwed up, and then they re-implement the class structure. So they just end up doing what fascists will say they want to do in the beginning. So, like, communists start off communists, and if they get what they want, then at the end of the day, they just become fascists. Again, like I would rather just subscribe to a group of people that are at least honest about it up front. So that's that. Okay, if I accept the rigid class structure notion, which was invented by humans, there are no examples of rigid class structure in nature the way humans have done it. How do you deal with class mobility? Well, I already answered that several times. We are notorious for getting this wrong. There are hierarchies in nature for sure, but in nature you are not born into the alpha role. You earn it. In human class structures, people are born into power. They are born into extreme privilege in many instances, yes, but not always, without possessing any valuable skills or capabilities. But, well, they can learn those skills and capabilities, and they should, yet remain in that privileged position for their entire lives, having never earned it. Now, this is a big question. Then on the flip side, brilliant people are born into the working class and can never escape into higher classes due to the circumstances of birth. And I get the question. Yeah, you'll have that. You'll have brilliant people who are born in the lower class, and then you will have completely incompetent and stupid people who are born in the upper class. But I mean that's always going to happen. You'll just have that. There is no way to get rid of that happening but generally I feel like that those tend to be kind of outliers. So I don't feel that it's really necessary to harp on that. But as for the whole nature thing, like there's the whole thing about there being hierarchies in nature, like it's pretty ridiculous to compare human hierarchies with animal hierarchy. Like, human beings are not animals. Like, we have much more sophisticated systems and social hierarchies when compared to lions and tigers and bears. Like, they don't they don't have an economic system. They don't have they don't have like merit necessarily. Like, they're just they're survival of the fittest. Human beings are not like that. Now, having said that, I do kind of believe in Darwinism. Like I do believe that in many aspects of human society, like the strongest are pretty much the fittest to lead and to do things, and the weakest stay at the bottom. Like that's in that sense, like that can be compared to animal hierarchies. And then the last point about being born in the alpha role and having to earn it type of thing. Like, again, certain people are just born to be alphas, and certain people kind of have to grow into that role. You'll have a little bit of both in society, but that doesn't take away from the fact that we still need that hierarchy, that structure. And at the end of the day, I don't really think that it matters if you're born into it or if you earn it. Like, if you're capable of doing it, if you're capable of being an alpha, then so be it. And another thing is this just like opened up a whole new can. But this whole thing in society about alpha males versus beta males and yada yada yada. Like, here's another thing. You know, similarly, like how society needs a class structure, you know, that hierarchy. Well, society needs alphas and betas. Like, this other thing about how people, particularly men in society, are taught that it's like bad to be a beta male. You know, you have to be an alpha male or else you're worthless because betas are bad. Like, what? No. Like most people, most men in society realistically are beta males, and like that's not a bad thing. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, we can't all be alpha males because like if everyone was an alpha male, you know, that society would collapse. I mean, that would just be anarchy because we can't all be number one. Like, you know, we played follow the leader in elementary school for a reason, you know, to teach us that, like, you know, sometimes you're not going to be the leader. Like, if you're a beta male, like, get the fuck over it. Like, I hate this, like, this Andrew Tate kind of mentality that has swept over all young men in society today. That they need to be, you know, tough guy number one. And if they're not, then they're just a worthless loser that no woman is ever going to want. Like, it's nonsense. It is such nonsense. So yeah, that's that. I think I should make another video about that. That's an interesting subject. Okay, next. I feel like it's a pretty big jump to go from a working society needs individuals who carry more important responsibilities than others to some people are innately born to be a lower tier person. Well, I mean, it's kind of sad, but like that is pretty much true. Like, and again, like being a lower tier person isn't a bad thing because if without the lower tier people, then we wouldn't have society itself. You know, just like without the upper tier people, we wouldn't have society itself. So like we need to perish this idea, you know, that it's bad to be in the lower class or that it's bad to be a beta type of thing. Like if we're gonna get anywhere. And then what process dictates that? I think I touched on that already. Should different classes of people be given different levels of access to care and other resources? Why? Okay, now that is a touchy subject. Should different classes of people be given different levels of access to care and other resources? Like, I hate saying yes and no, but pretty much yes and no. This opens up definitely the topic of welfare, which is something that I am generally really against. Like, I really do hate the idea of welfare in America, mostly because I feel like most people on welfare, most people that are homeless even, are just taking advantage of society. Like, it irritates the living hell out of me that, you know, as a working man, and I've been a working man since I was 16, haven't taken a day off, you know, unless I've been deathly ill or needed to do something very important, even all through COVID. It irritates the ever-loving shit out of me that a portion of my hard-earned money gets forcibly taken away from me by my government and given to people who are not, you know, not down on their luck, not running into unfortunate circumstances, but who are willingly, blatantly choosing to be lazy and not work. Like, I hate the idea of food stamps. I hate the idea of homeless shelters. Like, you know, like I'm sorry, but I really just do. Like when I see these people in my town standing on the streets with like these cardboard signs with Sharpie written, it's very interesting that they're always in the most populated areas. They're always at the places where there's the most people. Like, you have to ask yourselves, like, are these people actually trying to, like, you know, get their shit back together, or are they just mooching off of people and, you know, using the money that they donate from people who just want to pat themselves on the back and say that they did their good deed for the day? Like, are they actually trying to get better? Are they actually trying to find a job, or are they just using it to buy drugs and alcohol? You know, it's another thing that, like, a portion of my hard-earned money gets taken from me and gets used to build shelter for these people. That is insane. Somebody in one of my earlier videos asked me, I think it was on part 1 actually, what practical steps would you take to move America towards a fascist regime? Well, I would probably say, you know what? Round up the homeless people. Round up the homeless people and make them do the jobs that nobody wants to do. And I can already, like, if there's going to be people who say, like, oh, that's just so horribly mean and oppressive because you can't force people to work. Like, bullshit. Fuck that. Like, enough is enough. Like, I'm tired of this homeless epidemic, being covered in this shroud of like compassion for the oppressed when they're not even being oppressed. Like, if you're going to prove yourself to be a burden to society, I absolutely believe that there should be consequences for that. And I believe that, like, forced labor should actually happen. So like that's probably the darkest thing that I've admitted to in regards to a fascist regime. Like, there are a lot of people in the United States of America, whether you care to admit it or not, who should absolutely be forced to work. Like, they've ridden the gravy train and mooshed off of other people's money, hard workers' money, for long enough, and it needs to come to an end. And lastly, oh yeah, so that was it. That was all the questions I wanted to answer. There was one last one that I found very interesting. Some guy said, "Why I am an idiot explained" on part one of my video. Like I said, I expected comments like that, but he says, "Fascism only has one outcome, and that is to sacrifice your life for the benefit of the leader." Nonsense. Wrong, wrong, wrong. The outcome of fascism is not to sacrifice yourself to benefit the leader. The outcome of fascism is to sacrifice yourself to benefit the society, the whole, the bigger picture. And when I say sacrifice yourself, I don't mean, like, kill yourself. I don't mean that you should have absolutely no individuality, no creativity, no mind, no thought process. What I mean is, like, the individual is not to be placed above society. Like, the collective, like, if I agree with any principle of communism, it is the collective society is precedent. The collective society is top priority. So yeah, the idea that you have to sacrifice yourself to benefit the leader of a fascist regime is nonsense. Unless, of course, and this is possible, like, if the leader is just a tyrant and is just doing it all for himself, then yeah, obviously that's a problem. But I mean, any fascist regime, any regime period, which I believe are all just fundamentally fascist, whether they admit it or not, needs to be a true leader, needs to be someone who is more worried about the collective good than himself. And that's probably that's where I'm going to leave it off at. That's where God comes into the equation. Like, the leader at the top needs to be submitted to God. Like the leader I do not want the leader of my society to be anything less than a Christian, or in my case, a Catholic. Like, if you want to know for a fact that your leader is dedicated to the society as a whole rather than just his own self-interests, well, you better make sure he believes in God. Because if he doesn't believe in having any power above him, your society is cooked. All right, that's it for my little series, Why I Am a Fascist. I think I pretty much touched on everything I wanted to. I think I covered all the very basic principles that I believe in. If you happen to have seen this video or any of the other ones that I've posted, I welcome all comments, criticisms, questions, whatever. Like, I want to hear anything anyone has to say about the things that I've said that I believe in, and I'm planning on making more videos, because in this process I opened up a lot of different cans of worms, and I didn't open up a lot of cans of worms that I wanted to. So I'm gonna try to keep posting and tie more of it all together. So So yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed these videos, please leave me a like, give me a comment, and subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you very much. Have a great day.